Good evening, everyone. This is Dallas McClain with Biohackers Magazine. We are here at the Biohacking Congress, where there's over 30 great speakers and 30 health professionals and products. And we're very excited to learn from all these scientists and doctors and health professionals in the industry and learn about the future of health, pretty much, with biohacking. Be sure to join us at the next Congress in Boston, June 11th and June 12th, Biohacking Congress. Be sure to check that out at biohackingcongress.com. Without further ado, I'm here with Mr. Evan Transue, who is the host of the Health Detective podcast through FDN, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, which specializes in testing and formulating different types of regimens, so to speak, to help people's health and livelihood. So, Evan, welcome.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be doing this with you. Dallas and I have gotten to talk a little bit outside of this, and we met at the last Congress, so I'm excited to see where the conversation goes.
Yes, we're very excited, and Evan has a lot of experience, as we said, through the podcast, so he's spoken to a lot of different people, a lot of different problems, so we're definitely going to get into some of those details and everything. But first, Evan, I wanted to get a little bit of a personal take from your side. How did you get into this space of biohacking and functional diagnostic nutrition, and what is your mission, and how does that interplay with your daily life?
Yeah, so from pretty much a really young age, around 5 years old, I started getting my first health symptoms. I started dealing with panic attacks, and just to be clear, because this does matter, there's different reasons people can deal with that, I didn't have any trauma. Like, if anything, it's actually so far the opposite that's why it was confusing. I had a really good life. I was a blessed guy in that sense. And yet I'm having these panic attacks, that's starting to happen. And conventional medicine, I'm not saying they didn't try, I hate when people go that route.
Right.
But they didn't have a complete program for me at that time. In fact, at 5 years old, it wasn't even recognized that I was dealing with these panic attacks. I wouldn't get a proper diagnosis until I was 15. And the reason that we knew it was still a panic attack then is because when my parents took me at 15 and they said this, they're like, well, wait a second. This is the same thing we came in for him for at 5 years old, and you guys said that he's going to outgrow this, there's nothing to worry about. And that led to a lot of problems for me, even unrelated to the health stuff, just because I sat with that in my head my entire young life. Oh, I'm going to outgrow this, I'm going to outgrow this. And I kept thinking, because panic attacks are kind of a weird experience if you haven't dealt with them before, or anxiety or depression even is. So as my mental health got worse, and I kept thinking about that doctor saying that, I took on there must be something really wrong with Evan Transue, because the doctor couldn't figure it out.
Right.
Now again, I'm coming as like an 8 or 9 year old saying this, but I'm like, doctors are authority, he couldn't figure it out, I must be the problem. And so I didn't talk about these things at all. All of this other stuff's going on as well. I mean, severe cystic acne by the time I'm 18 years old. Menieres Disease, which was an incurable disease that I don't have symptoms of anymore, thankfully.
Wow.
GERD, chronic sinusitis, 20 courses of antibiotics before the age of 18, you name it, you know.
Goodness gracious.
And so there was a lot of stuff going on, and it was actually that moment, Dallas, where I got diagnosed with Menieres disease at 18. And it almost sounds ironic with how much else I had dealt with that this was the thing. But I looked up Menieres disease, and for those that don't know, I'll keep it really short. It's an inner ear disorder, so it actually causes extreme bouts of vertigo at completely random times. And so eventually some people can lose their license with this because you're not allowed to, like, you could be driving and it's full out vertigo.
Oh my God.
And for those that don't know the difference, if you ever had too much alcohol, it's like that, except you're not drunk, so it's really not fun. Because at least if you're drunk, you're kind of like, I don't care.
Right.
You know? But yeah, it's like that. Without that, the whole world's just shaking. I was told I was going to lose hearing in 1 ear and that I was going to need this medication for the rest of my life. And again, I don't mean to be rude, but that's really what the conversation was. Okay, here you go. And the prescription was filled, and I go pick it up from the pharmacy, and that was it.
Treat the symptom.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, what the heck? And so I look up Menieres disease, and I actually saw something kind of scary. I saw these suicide forums, and it's because of people that just couldn't get relief for it. They started living these really bad lives with this, and that scared me so much that I had suicidal ideations before when I was dealing with major depressive disorder, but that almost switched up in the weirdest way, where now I was having suicidal ideations that weren't really depression. It was giving up. I said, I have been sick my whole life. I'm done with this. I was just tired, man. I was giving up. I was like, I don't want to live like this for the rest of my life,
Of course.
knowing that I'm going to lose this hearing. Well, that was the best thought I ever had. And here's what I mean. When that came in, and I'm legitimately contemplating this, I'm thinking to myself, well, if I'm going to do that, shouldn't I try every darn thing out there first before I actually say, hey, I'm going to take my own life at 18 years old to do this?
Of course.
And that's what I did. That started with nutrition. I started switching that stuff around. I managed the symptoms, didn't cure them at the time, but managed the symptoms of the Menieres disease. Once I did that, I'm like, I'm on to something. I cleared up the cystic acne about 70%. in just a month's time, switching to organic and no sugar at that time of my life. And once I saw the needle like moving, I was like, okay, this is all I needed to hang in there and stick with it.
Right.
And that's led to this 8-year passion, eventually finding FDN, the world of biohacking. And so my mission now is really what I always say is to level the playing field. And all that means is this. I do not care. I'm not anti-Western medicine at all. If you want to go to the doctor, get that surgery that I could have gotten, and take that medication, that's fine. But I was only told about those things.
Right.
He never told me about the diet stuff that I needed to do. He never told me that it was even possible that this could be cured. I don't have the hearing loss anymore. That was measured at one point. Mm-hmm. So you tell me what else do you call that? That's cured to me. I can eat the foods that I couldn't eat before that triggered it. That's cured to me. So to not have those options even on the table when you're getting these diagnoses, which are very scary for a lot of people. I mean, we're talking about an inner ear thing. Imagine cancer,
right,
autoimmune disease, whatever. And technically Menieres might actually be an autoimmune disease. They're kind of finding that out, which makes sense given my family's history. I don't think it's fair that you only have one option. So I don't care what you do, but what needs to happen to level that playing field, like I said, that's the mission, is when you go in, hey, you can do this, but by the way, here's this information here, and we do believe that if you change this lifestyle stuff around, even if it's tough, even if it's dramatic, you should have the right to have that option before you get sent home with a medication for the rest of your life or they start taking parts of your body out. That's my mission.
Of course. Wow, thank you for stating that for everyone. I do want to elaborate a little bit on what you said with the whole trending of seeing this in biohacking of stories where you come from a very dark place, go through some very dark experiences, and then you find out some very enlightening news about yourself and discover an identity of, hey, I can try something different, completely different lifestyle, apply some changes, and I can come out of this dark place. You know, it's just very inspiring. And I think a lot of viewers will share that, story, especially getting into the biohacking industry. So Evan, talking a little bit about the company, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. So this company was started a little bit of time ago, but you guys really focus on getting to the root of the problem, but not necessarily identifying the problem, but looking at all the data that you can through testing, and stop me if I'm incorrect here, and then tackling it as metabolic chaos. I've heard this term many times, metabolic chaos. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think you did fine. So to kind of make it maybe a little more linear. So yeah, metabolic chaos, Reed Davis always jokes, the founder of FDN, is our one diagnosis. Now, we're not playing doctor, it's not a diagnosis, but what he's saying is that there are all these people like myself who have like 20 different diagnoses or symptoms, right? That's not any one of those things. You have stuff going on that's leading to this myriad of symptoms or diseases. That's metabolic chaos. Right. You have stuff going on below the surface that typically Western medicine might not pick up at all, or they only pick up as the diagnosis. And that's what we look at. So we're trained in functional lab analysis, and we use a very specific set of labs that he had found to work best. And the guy's highly qualified. And people don't realize this, because FDN's been around for about 13, 14 years as the course. But what they don't realize is that Reed has been doing this for over 20 years, and at one point, the whole reason he started the course is because the main lab he was using called him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're running more labs than anyone else in the country right now. What's happening here? You need to train people on this." And that's literally true. He worked with over 10,000 labs or something, and 10,000 people in his time in practice, and so he's quite qualified to teach about it. And so we use these set of labs. We identify hidden healing opportunities, and that's an acronym. It stands for hormonal, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and nervous system. So our tests look at that. And what we're finding is that stuff that typically Western medicine just doesn't look for. Okay, what food sensitivities have you developed? What little pathogens have made a nice home in your gut? Because when you're under a lot of stress, it allows those things to come in and just kind of work their magic at least, not magic for us. The hormonal problems, how has the stress that you've been under in your life actually taken its toll on you personally? Because your hormone results might look completely different than mine, even if we've had relatively different experiences, or similar experiences, I'm sorry.
Right.
That's that bio-individuality thing. Similar experiences, different outcomes on the labs. So we're looking at those types of things and more. And then what you find is that, and I think this is what you were trying to get at when you said, we're not necessarily finding the core problem. Reed will word it as this. What he knows from the system that he's used for years and decades now is that we can't always tell you exactly which lab was the most beneficial to you or me, but what we can tell you is after you're done, you always feel better and you're doing a lot better. So
Right.
we start with those labs, and then for the people who go through the course, I mean, you could take this as advanced or extreme as you want. I don't think it's necessary to have a successful practice in business. I've never really actually taken that route at all. But man, you can get very nerdy with this. There's multiple advanced courses always being added on to that. From the biohacking perspective, I'm actually about to propose an advanced course with Light that I could teach more about. And we're going to add that in. So it's always getting better, always expanding, but the core stuff does work really darn well for most of the things.
Very cool. And for people that don't know, I'm actually going through part of the program to the gratefulness of the FDN team, helping me identify some of those testing and things that could be wrong with my body, my lifestyle, and going through and taking supplementation and everything. And we're going to get into the kind of basis of the program too, but it's really cool how I think FDN focuses on not necessarily identifying the one thing, but focusing on starting from scratch, right? Take everything out that's bad and put everything in that's good, and see how it fits. You know, in a way of speaking, and that's kind of how I've experienced it. But they're very involved, FDN, with your process, and they want you people to be committed to the process.
Yeah.
So, expanding a little bit on that, people come from this desperate place. And you were talking about earlier how you were considering even suicidal thoughts and everything. If you're that desperate, how much more are you going to be committed to something if you really believe that it's going to work?
Yeah, I've seen it go two ways, unfortunately, and it's more the second option, which is the better one. But there is the first one where these poor people are so burnt out because they've tried so many things that we could tell them anything, and they don't believe it. You know, they've heard similar things, and it's sad because I'm like, this could be genuinely your ticket. And they're just not too enthusiastic about it. But I actually find that it's more the second option, at least in my experience, where it was someone like me that was completely dedicated to do whatever it took to get this done. And that's what makes FDN actually, for those types of people, a breeze. Is it going to be a little different than, you know, most diets? Might it even be a little more restrictive for a temporary period while we're doing the healing? Sure, you've been sick for 10, 15 years, right? Generally the people that come to us have been sick for a while.
Right.
Yes, you might need to tighten it up a little bit routine-wise, but once you're on the other side of that, there's more flexibility too, and I think that actually allows these people to get through the program really well. The whole reason I found FDN, I had about $1,200 total to my name with my best friend at the time. We were like 20, 21 years old, and I was so desperate to find out more about the health stuff. But remember, as we talked about earlier, I'd already gotten a hint of it. Like, I knew it was working. I had no one in my area that I could find that knew anything about this. So this is true. I went out west. I'm in Pennsylvania. I went out west because I don't know if the rest of the world has this stereotype, or especially the country. I just had this idea that that's like where the hippies are. That's where the natural people are. Now, I don't know that I'd classify FDN as hippies per se. I think it's very science-based.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I started going to health meetups out there. I found a woman named Jen Maleka, who is still a huge part of FDN to this day. I heard her speaking, and that's how I found out about it. So when I say committed, like, yeah, we actually find a lot of people like me who are going to risk everything and drive across the darn country when I have never even heard of FDN, just in hopes to find someone for the health issues. That's how desperate a lot of these people are.
Wow, that is very cool to hear. So, talking a little bit about the program of FDN, I know it's a little bit of a long program than maybe what people are expecting.
Sure.
So, we live in a world where everything is instant gratification. I want things fixed right away, right? And that's why a lot of people, I think, are pushed more into conventional medicine, traditional medicine. Take the pill, I want to get it fixed, right? But FDN takes a different approach. And you can stop me if I'm incorrect here, but you guys focus on taking everything out that's bad, putting everything in that's good, but doing it in a manner where it's not going to shock the body, not put you guys into a place where people feel insecure or anything. And I want to dive in a little bit more to that progress of start to finish. Can you explain
Okay,
that?
so what would it look like as someone going through FDN?
Right, exactly.
As
Just
a
a
client.
typical example, generic example.
Okay, so yeah, as a, you know, obviously we're talking about the course here too, so I'll do both
course,
briefly
please,
and keep it
please.
summarized. So if you're going through the course, that's super fun. We include 5 lab tests in the cost of tuition, actually, which was not always the case. We included a few labs when I was doing it, but now they include everything because they
Great.
want you to run those labs on yourself. You're going to get one-on-one mentorship. Some of that mentorship is actually going to be the analysis of your own lab results. And you do that about, it's like maybe I'd say a third to a half of the way through the course. And the reason that's important is because now you already know some stuff. And now you're with your mentor, so it's not like they're talking at you. You're having a legitimate conversation with this person, and I think that's really special. Like, you already kind of know what's going on with your labs. They're there to refine the thinking a little bit with years and years of experience and working with all these labs. So you're going through that. I always call it a no-fluff course. Reed Davis is not really one for formalities. You're not going to get 5 hours of content just on his life story. I think it's about 30 minutes, and then you're learning about steroidal sex hormones. Like, he's right into it right away. So when we say there's like 150 hours of course content, it's genuinely that amount of information and learning. So I think that's fun.
Right.
And you'll train through these different modules. You're getting quizzed along the way. Not like anything super tough, right? It's just simple stuff at the end. Now, once you're moving towards the end of the course, that's when we start getting into the real testing, because they are not just letting anyone become an FDN. And I think that's one of the things that has allowed this certification to establish a level of authority in the industry. You look it up yourself. I mean, you won't find many bad things about FDN at all. Like, there's really almost nothing. And it's because, we don't just let anyone through. You're going to have to pass the verbal final. You're going to have to take a midterm. You're going to have to take a huge written final, which, my God, that thing was a pain in the butt. But, you got to know it. You either know it or you don't, and It's pretty obvious by the time that you leave. We help you along the way. Your mentors are there to support you before those tests. But, no, you're going to take that. Now, once you graduate, the plus side of this is, since you did something hard, you get access to labs. And people always ask, well, how does that work? Well, we have our medical director program, and those doctors that are a part of that program trust the FDN process enough to allow you, even if you're unlicensed like myself, to utilize them to facilitate lab orders for your clients. This is completely legal, by the way, because you're not ordering a lab for the client. You're not running the test on them. The medical director program orders the test. The client runs it on themselves. They're paying you to analyze the results and create a protocol. And that's all in our terms of service agreement. So we create all the legal stuff for you as well. Like, we literally give you everything in the course and once you're graduated. Now, from a client perspective, if you're going through this, how does this look? Well, we're going to have, everyone technically can run their practice as they want, but something like FDN Thrive that you went through, right? You're going to have probably some kind of welcome or onboarding call. There's going to be pretty extensive intake forms. You're going to figure out like all the stuff that you've dealt with and the history that you've had. Then we're going to run the labs, or you're going to run the labs rather on yourself, get them sent back out. Once we get those results, we're going to talk to you and give you kind of our overall impression and picture. Like, what did we actually find with this? Because to the best of our ability, we do want to know why. Yes, we might not be always able to pinpoint this exact specific thing. No one knows everything about the human body yet. If we did, we wouldn't have Western or functional medicine. We'd all just have no health issues, Right. So there's always stuff to learn. But we're going to do the best of our ability to figure out, like for myself, okay, Evan, you have these mental health challenges. Well, do you see these? This is simple stuff. Do you see the food sensitivities that you have here? You said you're still eating these foods. Okay, that can cause neuroinflammation. Do you see how messed up your hormones are? That was true. Do you see that you have these gut pathogens which are highly correlated with mental health challenges? Oh, okay. So that's a basic, simple example of now we're clinically correlating with that client. So that's the clinical correlation. We see stuff on the labs. It doesn't automatically mean something. Does it correlate with the person in front of us and what they're presenting with? Yes. Okay, cool. Let's go after that. And then you're going through your protocol, and we customize it for you. Are you going to know everything in one session? No, and that's why we work with people over a usually 90-day period or even longer, depending on how people run their practice and what type of individuals they're taking on. Some are offering coaching in addition to this, because I would consider this more consulting than anything. I'm not saying they don't do some coaching unintentionally, but I would call it consulting more than anything. But some people run their practice a little differently, and FDN allows you the flexibility to do that. We don't put anyone in a box, just get through the certification and then do it how you wish after that.
So after 90 days, do they do another testing to see any improvements from lifestyle changes from the
In our world, yes.
Okay.
I will just be honest, let's be transparent. Clients, sometimes they're feeling so good, which is a good problem to have. They're like, oh, I don't need the testing and whatever, and they're not going to spend the money on it. I think you're doing them a disservice if you don't push that a little harder. But it is very hard to describe to someone that they need to do it. And the truth of the matter is, no, there's still a good handful that will be just fine without retesting. But there's some that aren't. It's like, well, you just wasted so much time and progress by not just running the extra.
You want to see the difference, don't you?
Yeah. Don't just trust your subjective stuff. That's good.
Yeah.
But also trust the objective. Because remember, the objective stuff was there long before you felt the subjective.
Well, that, and by showing the objective stuff, that's how you get more people into your way of thinking, right?
Of
If
course.
you just say subjectively, I feel better, how many people are really going to believe you? And I want to see the numbers.
Yeah, when the hormone one, especially for me, that was just so special because I was in what we call the exhaustive phase of HPA Axis Dysfunction, which if you see that at all naturally, which you really shouldn't, I mean, you're talking like a 50, 60, 70-year-old person. I'm running this at 21 years old, and I'm already in that phase. My cortisol is tanked. I just can't keep up with the stress of life. My melatonin's non-existent. Testosterone's starting to trend low. Who wants that in general, let alone as a 21-year-old guy?
Of course.
And then to eventually retest and see, not only was it almost like in a perfect range, it was actually, this was, again, a good problem to have. We have something called the acute phase. And so that means that you're actually reacting to the stress in your life appropriately, but there might be a little too much stress. I had a very minor version of that when I retested. So that means I moved out of the exhaustive, I moved out of the compensatory, and now my body actually has the ability. Acute means, by definition, that you are handling this stress properly. It's just that you have too much stress. So I can change that, right? That's on me. But to see that and see my hormones go back up, and of course, it's going to go quicker for someone who's a 21-year-old male, that was just amazing because I knew I felt better, and then to see that, I'm like, damn, like this did work well.
It's
This
so
is
nice
cool.
to see it on paper, yeah. And it's a lot of different dynamic data. We're not just talking about, blood oxidative, any stress or anything like that. We're also talking about a lot of different mental things.
So many
too.
markers, yeah.
Yeah, so many markers. So I do want to ask, because this is more of a curiosity question. You were mentioning at the beginning of this interview how you started having these problems as a child. So I know FDN focuses more on adults and everything, but from a personal standpoint, my daughter has a little bit of eczema issues and everything like that. And I know that can tie into a lot of nutrition and different stress or other types of markers as well. So do you guys ever work with kids, or have you considered working with kids in the future? Like, how does that work?
Absolutely. So just because typically the person who is motivated enough to do this and typically sick is actually usually a middle-aged woman. Now, of course, there's plenty of guys out there that deal with this stuff, but like statistically speaking, women they deal with 7 times more autoimmune disease, right? I think women might even deal with more cancer. I apologize. Don't quote me on that one. I don't like to say things I don't know. I think it might even be true for the cancer thing, which is scary, right? They're dealing with a lot more problems than us, so that's typically who's going in. But yeah, no, Reed actually worked with kids. A lot of the moms would bring in their kids. There's no reason this can't be done. There's just certain things that we get to do a little differently, so if anything, it's cheaper. You don't do the hormone test on someone who's like 6, 7 years old. That's not really a necessary thing.
Right.
But stool pathogen screening, yeah, you can take anyone's stool and look at that. Food sensitivity testing, especially with kids, man, their bounce back time, if you figure out what's going on there and you remove those foods, that's huge,
Yeah.
Especially with like an eczema type of thing. I'm not trying to just act like it's one thing that's ignorant, but that is a classic thing with really young people that Reed had seen in practice where like sometimes, from my understanding, all he would run is a food sensitivity test, and that alone usually would take care of it.
And are the tests usually less invasive for kids, I suppose?
Unfortunately, some of the stuff's always going to be the same. I mean, thankfully, a stool test's only
It's
so
not-
invasive,
not
right?
so bad,
Kids
yeah.
just poop on this thing, right? They
Right.
probably think it's funny, make a joke out of it. The food sensitivity test can be done a little differently. The MRT one, which is by far the gold standard, they have the best technology out there, and that's why we use it. It's patented. Yes, that's going to be 3 vials of blood. So is it safe to do? Yes. Are they going to want to do it? I don't know.
Right.
You could start with an IgG, IgA finger prick test. And so, you prick their finger, and it's quick. It's done fast. It's like if you ever had a glucometer or something for keto, that's the same type of thing. You just prick their finger, get a little blood,
Get the
you're good
drops
to
on
go.
the paper, yep.
Right, but just remember, the one problem is it is an incomplete form, in my opinion. When we have technology like the MRT uses, and that's a separate conversation, I don't see why we would use the IgG unless we don't have access to the MRT where we live.
Right.
So I would try to put the kid through it because the kid's going to suffer either way. I don't mean to. It's kind of a tough conversation,
I know what
right?
you mean. I know what you mean. Do you want to suffer later, or do you want to suffer right now, really quick? And,
Well, and they are suffering now if you're coming in and getting it with
Right.
some health symptom. Maybe it's eczema, maybe it's something worse.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to be willing to go through that little tiny bit of suffering so that you can get the longer effects of the benefits of finding out what it is, And the MRT, I think it's a great test too. It's so many markers and so many different things you can find out. But I think kids, like you were saying, as a kid, you're so insecure. You're still figuring out what life is. Why should you have to suffer and have these thoughts to think about as well? It just, in a way, it kind of robs you of your childhood if you're having to experience all of this suffering. You can't be a kid sometimes. I think that's why it's important to start early.
Yeah, and some people will be worried like, my kids won't do this, my kids won't do that. Kids are extraordinarily impressionable. And what I found is what that really means is that the parents aren't willing to do it. Why on earth would your 8-year-old or 9-year-old or 10-year-old do it then if mom and dad get to do something different or fun and they don't get to eat that food? So it's like, if you actually care, be a leader. and do the right thing, and you're helping your own health, right? It's not like you're just suffering, and then you help your kids' health as well. But to be truly successful with that, I think it always starts with the parents as well.
For sure.
Either allowing it completely in the household where it's so simple for the kids. They got to see that you're doing this too.
As a parent, we play a very important part in our children's health. You have to show that you're committed. You have to make those changes too, because the child doesn't just go out and decide, I'm going to stop eating Cheetos. It's like, no, you have to. You could provide the food. You have to do that. So
there is you've probably seen this. Maybe, I don't know. There's this meme on Facebook that goes around, and it's like a black and white thing, and it's like a mom and her kids sitting on the park bench, and then a mom and their kid sitting on the park bench on the other side. And the mom, with her phone in her hand, and her kid has her phone in her hand, so this is the first set, asks the other mom who's reading while the kid's reading, how do you get your kid to read? And it's like a joke because the mom's reading, so the kid wants to do what mom does, right? And if we spend all our time on the phones or eating crap food or going to McDonald's, good luck getting your kid to do the opposite, especially when they have to see you do it. Exactly. If you're going through the McDonald's drive-thru and they don't get to, there's going to be a problem in your household.
That's a very good point. So, so shifting topics just a little bit, we're in a world that's ever changing, right? And especially with the pandemic that's happened and everything, this has really shed a new light on a lot of different things, including health, because people are forced to look at themselves in the mirror more without going out into the world, and they're just being left alone with their thoughts, so to speak, because of the lack of social interaction that a lot of people had to go through. So have you guys seen any changes in your program or in your clientele as this pandemic has progressed?
Sure. I mean, obviously, I'll keep it. I know that you're not asking in this way. I'll keep it professional. I will just say that FDN's consistently had some of the best months ever for people coming in through as practitioners. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. One is what you just said, an awareness, like, wow, I need to do something about my health. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become a practitioner. That just might mean you're going to work with someone. So what's the practitioner thing? Well, I think what people love about FDN is we were doing the online thing before it was cool. The vast majority of FDNs are doing their own online practice. And in our business side of things, which is separate from the course, to be clear, we help people with that immensely. And it's not just a few people that are making good money with this. I mean, we have thousands of people running around making a living directly or indirectly with FDN. Like, this works. It worked for me. Works for a lot of people. Works for a lot of people at this Congress that we're at right now.
Right.
But, you got to put in the work. It's just like anything else. But I think it's pretty easy in terms of most things. Like, there's a system in place, you kind of just have to follow predictable steps. So we've seen huge growth in that sense. And then the clients thing, it's the same kind of thing, where I would say there's even more of an influx there, where of the practitioners I know in our professionals network group on Facebook, they're talking about having some of the best months of their life. And not that it's just about money, but it's like they're doing a good service. You should get paid for it.
Of course.
They're having more and more people come in. It actually inspired me to open an in-person business with kind of light therapy and stuff like that, because I actually I get that there's a risk with the lockdowns and stuff, but I'm like, you know what? No, I think people care about this more than ever. I think this is a great time to open this up. And so that's been going well so far. And I think there's more of an awareness. I think we got a long ways to go. All you got to do is go to your local grocery store or Walmart or Target or whatever to realize, wow, okay, most people don't know about this stuff. But we're seeing an increase, and I think with the internet, this allows this stuff to spread rapidly. I think we're going to be looking at a whole new world health-wise in 5 to 10 years, but it's going to be rocky road to get there, if I'm being honest.
Slow and steady.
Yeah.
Right? So we talked a little bit about the past of how you guys have grown and everything, but keeping our minds in the present, what are you guys doing today to be prepared for the future in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, well, people like me. Reed brought me on in November of 2020, just having the podcast, having this stuff set up, but some of the stuff's private. I can't talk about how much money's being spent to grow this. I really wish people could see how much that guy cares and how much he risks, to be honest, to make FDN grow and best serve the people in there. It's a short story. The coolest thing I ever saw was probably a week of being in, like, actually working for Reed in some way, and I'm on a meeting. And listen, it's one thing when people act cool when they're trying to sell you something, right? It's another thing when you see that when you're actually involved with them. You don't know if they're going to change up, right? Let's be honest.
Of course.
Is it their business face or their public face? Well, we're on this call, and it wasn't their fault. They were doing what they needed to do, but they suggested another employee that we bring on this person. And it basically, Reed started asking questions, and he realized all this person was trying to do was sell supplements to our graduates, which he would have gotten a very large cut of. This guy, I mean, I don't want to say freaked out, but like, he was more cursing at the concept. You would never do that to an employee, but like, he was just like, we're not doing that, blank in here. Like, that's not what we're going to do. They're not going to come in and use my graduates just to sell some cheap blank. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, I love this guy.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I love that. That's probably actually one of the main reasons I'm still with them to this day. Not that I don't like the other stuff, but I'm loyal to people who actually have integrity like that.
Yeah.
So that's another way that we're prepping, is just by consistently sticking with the same principles that worked. And that, I know that the number of employees has grown at least 30 to 40% since the beginning of the pandemic.
Wow.
So we've been preparing accordingly, and just, yeah, we're ready. FDN Business School is coming out now. And so let's say hypothetically you were even watching this live, which I don't think we're live, right? We're just recording this.
Yes, sir.
Well, if you took this today, and then the course that is, and then started doing it at even a fast pace, FDN Business School would have already been out. And that is now our place where we're taking people from 0 to hero basically in 90 days. And the reason that matters and is relevant to this conversation is because we kind of had talked about in the beginning, dealing with this stuff at a young age, and how we find this work, and a lot of people have these like dark stories that get into this. And that's because no 5-year-old has ever woken up and said, "Mommy and Daddy, I can't wait to be a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner or a biohacker." We're just not there yet. It finds you, right? The work finds you because of the things that you've dealt with. And so we realize that just because it finds you, it doesn't mean you know a thing about business or how to do marketing or how to do sales or anything.
Right.
So now we're teaching people all of that. So yeah, we're prepping in every single sense of the word, and it's been going really well. And the podcast is another way, allowing these people to get this information that need to hear it. That has been the coolest blessing of being with FDN, even probably more than my health stuff, to get to interview other people who have been through this and use this as a means to share the information and level the playing field, like we said. That's one of the best things I've ever been able to do. So I'm lucky that he has me as the co-host there.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure you come across a lot of motivated individuals that are just dying to share their stories and educate the world. And we really need it right now,
Yeah.
Talking a little bit, I heard you mention earlier about the light therapy thing. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and what you...
Sure. So I study light. I thought it was a really interesting thing. And again, we might actually add this into FDN now because of the experiences that I've had with it and just wanting to bring it into FDN. But yeah, to keep it short, I say light therapy in a very general sense. When people say that, they're normally talking about seasonal affective disorder and like using those bright lamps for that. I'm talking about red light. I'm talking about near infrared and far infrared. I'm actually even talking about UV light, which most people are like, whoa, why would you ever use UV light? I think there's a time and place depending on where the person lives and given their unique circumstances. My facility is in Pennsylvania. We have a tanning bed in there. Now, it's not just any tanning bed that's just going to blast you. It's a special one that actually senses your forehead, and then it senses your forearm, because that's the darkest part of your skin, and the lightest part that we can appropriately scan, right? No one's going to pull out their butt for us at the light therapy studio.
Okay.
Wouldn't work like that. So then it actually creates a customized dose of UV light for you based on that, so you don't burn. It's clinically proven to raise your vitamin D levels, and we can do that in the middle of winter now when you're feeling really sick and really bad, when you cannot get any UVB from that sun, where I live at least, in that time of year. So light therapy is all of that stuff for me, so I'm not sure if you want to take any particular route, but I like using light.
Yeah, so I like how you're using that to tie it into the FDN, because FDN focuses a lot, I think, on the nutritional side of things. But do you guys also, and this was a question I thought of a couple minutes ago, genetically, we're all a little bit different people, right? Everyone is a different person. What works for one person may not work for another. How do you guys account for those differences in the person's genes, so to speak, but also like who the person is and their lifestyle and flexibility?
Well, and it's an interesting question that I know just behind the scenes, and I hope it's okay to share, like from Reed's perspective. I know that we're still pondering this, because we have access to gene testing as FDNs. It's not in the main course, but we actually have access to it. And
I didn't know that. Cool.
Not many people realize that. You can get it afterwards. But the question still remains, FDN was working before these whole genetic SNP tests that are like now widely available came out. And even for myself, I genuinely wonder, like, is it necessary 100%? Because if you figure out the other stuff, this is all epigenetic expression, right? Our ancestors were not sick, as far as we know, not in the way that we are, not chronic disease, Neolithic diseases, and they didn't have gene tests. They just did the right things for their bodies and their environments, and they stayed well because of that.
That's a good point.
So assuming you believe that paradigm and that story to be true, which I do believe it to be true, I think it was a lot longer than we think, but I do think it existed. Well, we don't need gene tests for that. Then you could also make the argument, well, we don't need any tests at all, so fair enough. So I hate to give you kind of an obscure answer. I don't know the answer to that yet. I don't even think we do yet, but we've been talking about, should we incorporate more gene stuff even in the training? Does this have a benefit, or does this just allow people to really reduce some symptoms and then think, oh, well, I treated my genes, I'm fine, and then not do the actual work that they need to do to get better long term? I will say from a personal perspective, not speaking on behalf of FDN, I think the gene stuff's interesting. I think it's going to go much farther than it is now. And then at one point, this will probably be standard in everyone's place. But I mean, yeah, when we only have like 100-something SNPs that are really solid in the science, that might be a little early to start.
Right.
Well,
Well,
on that.
and the important thing is the intention is there. You guys are still trying to stay ahead of what's going on in
Always,
the world. And,
yeah.
and all the other tests that are out there, you're trying to integrate everything to get the best of what you can in each way possible. So I think that's great. To close, Evan, I'd like to ask if you could give some advice to, because maybe someone is watching this video and they're thinking, maybe FDN's the answer for me. All this stuff is happening in my life right now. How can biohacking help me? How can FDN help me? How can light help me? What would you like to say to those?
Just like, who is this for, maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I would say the ideal person is someone who is a data-driven nerd, because you gotta love the nerdy stuff, right? This isn't conceptual here necessarily. Like, you gotta love the labs and stuff like that. I also think it's not necessary, but it's important from my perspective to be someone who's actually been through the health stuff, okay? And then don't think you need to be perfect, right? I think a lot of us run into this imposter syndrome where like, oh my God, my mental health isn't perfect. My skin, I get breakouts when I travel all the time. I have one right now, right? But that doesn't mean I don't know my stuff. That doesn't mean I can't help a bunch of people or do this interview or give this lecture today. I can still do all that stuff.
Right.
So don't let it be an intimidating thing, because I see that all the time where people are like, oh, well, I'm not perfect with my health, so I can't go out and do this. No, go through the course, do the best you can. You still have the ability to help someone then. Right? And no one cares. They just want to know that you can help them. And if you've gotten progress with whatever you've dealt with, then that's important. So yeah, someone who wants to really help people, someone that might need help with the business stuff, we got your back on that. That's 100% for sure. But ideally someone with a story, whether it's family members or themselves. I've seen like one person literally in 5 years that I know of went through this without really any health story, and they loved it. They know this stuff. They're still active in the community actually, but they went off and did a marketing job. They did something else.
Okay.
Everyone else is doing this in their work in some way or the other. I don't actually technically work as a practitioner always. I do speaking and I became an author. Others have an in-person business. Others have hugely successful businesses online. There's many ways to take it, but you got to come in with the right heart. And I'll say the last thing is, Reed always says you got to walk the walk and you got to want to help people. So if you're not willing to walk the walk, this definitely isn't for you. But if you're willing to do all those things, I think you're good to go.
Well said. Evan Transue, the
Thank you,
host
sir.
of the Health Detective Podcast
Yeah,
from
check out the
FDN.
podcast.
And this is Dallas McClain, Biohackers Magazine. We're here at the Biohacking Congress in Las Vegas, wishing you a happy health.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.